For most of your life, you might have been told that the bottom number of your blood pressure is the one to watch, or perhaps you were told that both numbers carry equal weight regardless of your age. But once you pass the age of 60, the rules of the game change completely, and relying on the advice meant for a 40-year-old can actually put your health at risk. There is a specific shift in how your cardiovascular system behaves as you get older, and understanding which number to prioritize is the key to protecting your brain, your kidneys, and your heart from unexpected events. I'm Dr. Ben Harris, and today I want to clear up the confusion surrounding systolic and diastolic pressure, and I want to help you focus on the single metric that matters most for your longevity. Most people focus strictly on lowering the top number or the bottom number, but I will show you why the gap between them might actually tell us the most about the health of your arteries after you understand the setup. 1. The 5-minute stillness rule. Before we can even discuss which number is more dangerous, we have to make sure the numbers you are seeing are actually real, because for many seniors, they are not. The very first step to understanding your blood pressure risk is ensuring that you are not accidentally measuring your activity level instead of your resting pressure. This sounds simple, but it is the single most common reason for unnecessary medication, increases, and unnecessary panic in older adults. If you take your measurement at the wrong moment, you are effectively lying to your doctor and to yourself about the state of your health. Let me tell you about Robert. Robert was 72 years old, and he was a man who liked to get things done early in the morning. He would wake up, drink his coffee, walk down the long driveway to get the mail, walk back up, and then immediately sit down at his kitchen table to check his blood pressure. He thought he was being responsible by doing it at the same time every day. However, Robert was consistently seeing a top number in the 150s and 160s. Naturally, this terrified him. He would see that high number, and his heart would start racing even faster, which only pushed the number higher. He came to me convinced that his medication had stopped working and that he was on the verge of a stroke. When we looked at his routine, the mistake was obvious, yet it is one that millions of people make. Robert was measuring his active blood pressure, not his resting blood pressure. When you walk up a driveway, or even when you just walk from the bedroom to the kitchen, your heart has to pump harder to move blood to your leg muscles. This is a normal, healthy response. Your blood pressure is supposed to go up when you move. If it didn't, you would faint every time you stood up. Robert wasn't hypertensive in that moment. He was just active. We changed one simple thing in his routine. I told him to sit in his chair for fully 5 minutes, doing absolutely nothing before pressing the start button on his machine. He had to sit with his back supported and his feet flat on the floor. When he did this, his reading dropped from 160 down to 128. He didn't need more medication. He just needed stillness. This is why the 5-minute stillness rule is non-negotiable for anyone over 60. As we age, our baroreceptors, the little sensors in our neck and arteries that regulate blood pressure, become a little less sensitive. They don't adjust as quickly as they did when we were 30. This means it takes a little longer for your system to return to baseline after you have been moving around. If you measure too soon, you are capturing the noise of your movement, not the true pressure of your arteries. Here is exactly how you need to do this to get a reading you can trust. You need to find a place in your home where you can sit comfortably. A dining chair is usually better than a soft sofa because it supports your back in an upright position. If you slouch on a soft couch, it can actually compress the abdomen slightly and alter the reading. You want your feet flat on the floor, not crossed. Crossing your legs at the ankles or knees can raise the top number by as much as 8 to 10 points. Once you are seated, look at the clock. You need to wait 5 full minutes. This is not 30 seconds, and it is not 2 minutes. It needs to be 5. During this time, you are not reading the newspaper, you are not scrolling through news on your phone, and you are definitely not talking. Talking raises blood pressure almost instantly because it requires effort and engagement. You want to be completely passive. Think of this as a mini meditation. You are letting the dust settle. You are letting your heart rate slow down to its resting pace. After the 5 minutes are up, then you put on the cuff. Make sure the cuff is on your bare skin, not over a sweater or a shirt sleeve. Rolled up sleeves can act like a tourniquet, tightening around the upper arm and skewing the numbers. The cuff should be at the same level as your heart. If the cuff is too low, like on your wrist while your hand is in your lap, the reading will be falsely high. If it is too high, the reading will be falsely low. Support your arm on the table so the cuff is level with the middle of your chest. When you press the button, stay silent and still. Don't watch the numbers counting up and down if it makes you anxious. Look out the window or close your eyes. This simple practice of waiting 5 minutes removes the variable of physical exertion. It gives you a baseline that reflects what your heart is doing when it isn't under the stress of movement. For seniors, this distinction is critical because our blood pressure is more volatile than it was in our youth. It swings more easily. By anchoring your measurement in stillness, you protect yourself from the anxiety of false positives. Before we move on to the next step, I'd love to get a sense of where you are starting from. Please comment below with your age and the usual range of your top number. Is it in the 120s, 130s, 140s, or higher? It helps to see that you are not alone in this journey. This supports steadier readings and prevents unnecessary worry about numbers that are simply a reaction to movement. 2. The top number truth. Now that we have established how to get an accurate reading, we can answer the question in the title: which number is more dangerous for seniors? Is it the top number, the systolic, or the bottom number, the diastolic? For decades, medical focus was heavily placed on the bottom number. You might remember doctors saying that the bottom number was the measure of your heart's resting pressure, and therefore the most critical. However, large-scale studies and decades of observation have shifted this understanding, specifically for the older population. For you, the top number is the one that demands your attention. The top number is your systolic pressure. This measures the force of blood against your artery walls when your heart beats, when it squeezes. The bottom number, the diastolic, measures the force when your heart is resting between beats. In younger people, a high bottom number is often the warning sign of future trouble. But after age 60, a different phenomenon occurs. The bottom number often starts to naturally decrease or stay stable, while the top number begins to climb. This condition is so common it has a name: isolated systolic hypertension. Let me share the story of Linda to illustrate why this matters. Linda was 68 years old and she felt generally healthy. She saw her doctor once a year, and every time her blood pressure was checked. Her readings were usually around 158/70. Linda looked at that bottom number, 70, and felt reassured. She knew that 70 was a perfect, healthy number for diastolic pressure. Because the bottom number was normal, she assumed the top number wasn't a big deal. She told herself, well, at least one of them is good, so I'm probably fine. She ignored the 158, attributing it to stress or just getting older. This was a dangerous mistake. Linda didn't realize that the high top number was a direct reflection of the stiffness in her large arteries. Think of your arteries like a garden hose. When the hose is new, it is rubbery and elastic. If you pump water through it, the hose stretches to accommodate the flow. As we age, the arteries lose that elasticity. They become more like a stiff metal pipe than a rubber hose. They don't stretch as easily when the heart pumps. Because the vessel won't stretch, the pressure inside shoots up dramatically every time the heart beats. That is why the top number goes high. Linda eventually started experiencing headaches and mild dizziness. When she finally addressed it, we explained that a top number of 158 meant her brain and kidneys were being hammered with excessive force 60 to 80 times a minute, every single hour of the day. The normal bottom number was actually misleading her. In seniors, a low bottom number combined with a high top number is the classic signature of stiff arteries. The reason the top number is more dangerous in this context is that it is the strongest predictor of stroke and heart attack risk in people over 60. The sheer force represented by that systolic number is what can damage the delicate vessels in the brain or cause a plaque to rupture. If you ignore the top number because the bottom number looks good, you are ignoring the primary red flag that your body is waving at you. We worked with Linda to focus entirely on bringing that 158 down. We didn't worry about the 70. The 70 was fine. We needed to soften the impact of that systolic wave. We used a combination of lifestyle changes, which we will discuss in this video, and her doctor adjusted her regimen to specifically target arterial stiffness. Over 6 months, her top number came down to 132. She noticed the headaches vanished, and she had more energy because her heart wasn't fighting against such high resistance with every beat. So, here is the simple explanation. If you are over 60, do not be lulled into a false sense of security by a normal bottom number. If your bottom number is 80 or 70 or even 60, that is great, but it does not cancel out a top number of 150 or 160. The top number is the workload your heart is facing. It is the pressure that your delicate capillaries are enduring. You want to aim for a systolic pressure below 130 if you can do so without dizziness or fatigue, but certainly getting it below 140 is a massive victory for your long-term health. However, there is a nuance here that brings us back to the open loop I mentioned at the start. It is the gap between the numbers. If your top number is 160 and your bottom number is 60, the gap is 100 points. This gap is called pulse pressure. A wide pulse pressure is a strong indicator of arterial stiffness. It confirms that the vessels are not expanding and recoiling as they should. So, while the top number is the danger zone, the relationship between the two confirms the underlying problem: stiffness. To manage this, you don't need to calculate complex math every day. You simply need to shift your mindset. When you sit down for your 5-minute measurement, look at that top number. That is your target. That is your scorecard. If you can lower the top number, you are directly reducing the strain on your heart and the risk to your brain. If you know someone over 50 who could benefit from this, share this video and subscribe for more simple blood pressure and blood sugar tips. This shift in focus ensures you are fighting the right battle for your age group. 3. The glucose connection. We cannot talk about blood pressure in seniors without talking about blood sugar. These two systems are not separate. They are intimately connected. In fact, high blood sugar is often the silent driver keeping your blood pressure high, even when you are doing everything else right. You might be cutting salt, you might be taking your walks, but if your blood sugar is running high, even if you aren't a diagnosed diabetic, it keeps your arteries stiff and your pressure elevated. Let's look at the story of James. James was 74 and he was frustrated. He was doing everything his cardiologist told him to do. He was eating low-sodium foods, he was taking his medication, and he was exercising. Yet, his systolic blood pressure, that top number, refused to budge below 145. He felt like he was fighting a losing battle. He came to me saying, "I'm eating like a rabbit, doctor, but my pressure won't go down." When we dug a little deeper, we looked at his blood work. James wasn't checking his blood sugar because he had never been told he was diabetic, but his fasting glucose was creeping up into the pre-diabetic range, sitting around 115 to 120 consistently. James loved his morning toast and jam, and he enjoyed a large bowl of pasta for dinner. He didn't eat much salt, but he was eating a significant amount of refined carbohydrates. Here is what was happening inside James's body. When you have elevated blood sugar over a long period, those sugar molecules bind to the proteins in your blood vessel walls. This process is called glycation. You can think of it like a slow caramelization. It makes the vessel walls sticky and rigid. Remember the garden hose analogy? High blood sugar effectively cooks the hose, making it brittle and hard. It destroys the flexibility of the arteries. When the arteries cannot expand, the pressure goes up. It is a mechanical certainty. Furthermore, high insulin levels, which come from eating a lot of sugar and refined carbs, tell your kidneys to hold on to sodium. So James was eating less salt, but his high insulin levels were forcing his body to hoard every milligram of salt he did eat. His body was retaining water and stiffening up, all because of the sugar, not the salt shaker. Once James understood this connection, he was willing to try a change. He didn't go on a starvation diet. He simply adjusted the balance of his meals. He started swapping his morning toast for eggs with spinach. He swapped his evening pasta for grilled chicken with a large side of green beans and a smaller portion of roasted potatoes. He focused on protein and fiber, which keep blood sugar steady. The results were remarkable. Within 3 months, his fasting glucose dropped down to 95. As his sugar levels normalized, his insulin levels dropped. His kidneys started flushing out the excess sodium and water, and crucially, the inflammation in his arteries began to settle down. His blood pressure, which had been stuck at 145, drifted down to 128. He hadn't changed his blood pressure medication. He had fixed the metabolic problem that was driving the pressure. This is why, if you are struggling with a stubborn top number, you must look at your blood sugar. You don't have to be a full-blown diabetic for sugar to affect your blood pressure. The damage starts happening in the pre-diabetic range. The stiffening of the arteries is a slow process, but it is reversible to a degree if you catch it and stop feeding the fire. So how do you apply this? You start by being aware of the white foods in your diet: bread, rice, pasta, sugar, and flour. You don't have to eliminate them forever, but you should view them as luxury items rather than staples. Prioritize foods that grow above the ground, like leafy greens, peppers, zucchini, and broccoli. These foods are full of fiber, which slows down the absorption of sugar and protects your blood vessels. Also, be aware of when you eat. Eating a heavy carbohydrate meal late at night causes a sugar spike while you sleep, which can keep your blood pressure elevated overnight. This is called non-dipping blood pressure, where the pressure doesn't drop during sleep as it should. It puts a lot of strain on the heart. Try to have your lightest meal in the evening, and try to finish eating 3 hours before bed. If you use insulin or glucose-lowering medication, please check your readings frequently because changes in food or activity can affect your blood sugar levels, and you want to avoid going too low. But for most seniors, stabilizing blood sugar is the hidden lever that finally unlocks better blood pressure control. James learned that his blood pressure problem was actually a blood sugar problem in disguise. By fixing the root cause, he improved both numbers. This holistic approach treats the vessel, not just the number. Another helpful step is to become friends with water. We often underestimate the power of simple hydration, but for older adults, water intake is directly linked to blood volume and blood thickness. If you are enjoying these tips and want to stay on top of your heart health, please verify you are subscribed to the channel. There are still several powerful levers we need to discuss that can help you manage these numbers safely and effectively. We need to talk about the nutrients that relax the vessel walls, the breathing techniques that can lower a spike in minutes, and the specific way to move your body to get the best benefit for both sugar and pressure. One of the most critical elements in this equation is a mineral that acts as the direct opposite of sodium. Most people know they should lower their salt, but very few people realize that lowering salt is only half the battle. If you lower salt, but do not increase this specific mineral, your body still struggles to maintain the right pressure in the pipes. It is like trying to balance a seesaw by only taking weight off one side. You actually need to add weight to the other side to find equilibrium. 4. The potassium balance. We ended the last section talking about the mineral that acts as the counterweight to sodium. That mineral is potassium. If you are focused on lowering your top number, understanding the relationship between sodium and potassium is absolutely essential. Most seniors have been drilled for years on the importance of a low-salt diet. You have likely been told to hide the salt shaker, to avoid canned soups, and to read every label for sodium content. While this is generally good advice, it is incomplete advice. Focusing only on removing sodium is like trying to drive a car by only using the brake and never the steering wheel. You might stop the car, but you won't get where you want to go. To actually relax the arteries and bring that systolic number down, you need to actively consume potassium. Let me introduce you to Margaret. Margaret was 70 years old, and she was the most disciplined patient I had ever met regarding her diet. She was terrified of her blood pressure, which hovered around 155/85. Her doctor had told her to cut salt, so she did, aggressively. She stopped seasoning her food entirely. She ate boiled chicken, plain rice, and plain oatmeal. She was miserable because her food had no flavor, but she was determined to lower her numbers. However, after 3 months of this torture, her top number had only dropped to 150. She was frustrated and ready to give up. She told me, I'm eating cardboard and it's not working. When we looked at Margaret's food diary, the problem was immediately clear. She had successfully removed sodium, but she had also removed almost all sources of nutrition. By avoiding all prepared foods and sticking to plain grains and boiled meats, she was consuming almost zero potassium. Her body was in a state of mineral imbalance. Your blood vessels rely on a delicate mechanism called the sodium-potassium pump. This mechanism lives in the cells of your artery walls. Sodium helps contract the vessel, it tightens it. Potassium helps relax the vessel, it opens it up. Because Margaret had low potassium, her arteries were stuck in a state of mild constriction. They couldn't relax no matter how little salt she ate. We changed Margaret's approach. We didn't tell her to eat more salt, but we told her to flood her system with potassium-rich foods. She started adding half an avocado to her lunch. She started eating a baked potato with the skin on for dinner. Potatoes are actually one of the highest sources of potassium, much higher than bananas, provided you don't drown them in butter and salt. She added steamed spinach and snacking on pumpkin seeds. She started eating salmon, which is fantastic for heart health. Within 4 weeks, Margaret's blood pressure dropped to 135/75. She was eating delicious food again, and her arteries finally had the chemical signal they needed to let go and relax. She learned that adding the right food is often more powerful than just subtracting the bad food. For you to apply this, you need to look at your plate. If your plate is mostly beige, bread, pasta, rice, chicken, you are likely potassium deficient. You want color. Dark leafy greens, sweet potatoes, regular potatoes, avocados, beans, and yogurt are excellent sources. Aim to get potassium from food, not supplements, unless your doctor specifically prescribes them. Potassium supplements can be tricky and can sometimes cause heart rhythm issues if the dose is too high. Food is the safest and most effective delivery system. However, a very important safety note here. If you have been diagnosed with advanced kidney disease, chronic kidney disease, you must talk to your doctor before increasing your potassium intake. The kidneys are responsible for filtering potassium, and if they are not working at full capacity, potassium can build up in the blood to dangerous levels. But for the vast majority of seniors with normal kidney function, increasing potassium is one of the most effective ways to soften the arteries and lower that dangerous top number. This balances the equation in your blood vessels, allowing them to expand naturally with each heartbeat. 5. The breathing reset. Now, let's talk about a tool you can use instantly. Sometimes, despite your best efforts with diet and medication, you will sit down to measure your blood pressure and see a high number. Maybe you are stressed, maybe you had a bad night's sleep, or maybe you are just anxious about the measurement itself. This is where the mechanics of your breathing become your most powerful immediate lever. We often think of breathing as automatic, something that just happens, but how you breathe sends a direct signal to your nervous system, telling it whether to panic or to relax. This brings me to the story of Arthur. Arthur was 78, and he suffered from a classic case of white coat syndrome, but he had it even in his own living room. Every time he took the blood pressure cuff out of the drawer, his heart rate would climb. He would put the cuff on, and as he felt it tighten around his arm, he would unconsciously hold his breath or take short, shallow gasps. By the time the machine gave a reading, his top number would be 175. He would see that number, panic further, take it again, and see 180. He was stuck in a feedback loop of anxiety and adrenaline. Arthur was convinced he had uncontrollable hypertension, but he didn't. He had uncontrolled breathing. When you take short, shallow breaths into your upper chest, or when you hold your breath, you are activating the sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight response. This dumps adrenaline into your bloodstream, which instantly tightens your blood vessels and speeds up your heart. It is a survival mechanism, but it is terrible for your blood pressure readings. I taught Arthur a technique specifically designed to override this response. It is often called resonance breathing, or simply the exhale extension. The rule is simple. Make your exhale longer than your inhale. When you inhale, your heart rate naturally speeds up slightly. When you exhale, your heart rate slows down. By extending the exhale, you are forcing your heart to spend more time in the slow down phase. We practiced this together. I had Arthur sit in his chair with the cuff on his arm. Before pressing the start button, we did 2 minutes of breathing. He would breathe in through his nose for a count of 4, deep into his belly so his stomach expanded, not his shoulders. Then he would purse his lips like he was blowing out a candle and exhale slowly and gently for a count of 8. In for 4, out for 8. After 2 minutes of this, his shoulders dropped, his face relaxed. We pressed the button. While the machine was squeezing, he continued the slow breathing, not deep, just slow and rhythmic. The result? His reading came up as 138/78. He looked at the machine in disbelief. "Is it broken?" he asked. It wasn't broken. He had simply turned off the adrenaline pump. The 1975 was a real reading, but it was a reading driven by panic. The 1938 was his true vascular reality. For anyone over 60, this technique is a game changer because our systems are more sensitive to stress hormones. You can do this anywhere. If you are sitting in the doctor's waiting room, do the 4 in, 8 out breathing. If you are stuck in traffic and feel your neck getting tight, do the breathing. It physically forces the blood vessels to dilate. A word of caution. If breathing out for 8 seconds feels too long and makes you dizzy, start with breathing in for 3 and out for 6. The numbers don't have to be exact. The principle is that the exhale must be long, slow, and complete. This empties the lungs of carbon dioxide and resets the chemical balance in your blood, signaling safety to your brain. This is the fastest way to intervene when you see a spike, proving that you have more control over your physiology than you think. 6. The hydration factor. We often overlook the simplest inputs, and for seniors, water is the one input that gets neglected the most. As we age, our thirst mechanism, the signal from the brain that tells us, "Hey, drink some water," starts to fade. You can be significantly dehydrated and not even feel thirsty. This has profound implications for your blood pressure, and it can cause the numbers to swing wildly in both directions, although for many, it leads to a thickening of the blood that drives pressure up. Let's talk about Helen. Helen was 82 years old. She lived alone and was very independent. However, she had a problem that many older adults deal with. She didn't want to spend her entire night waking up to go to the bathroom. To manage this, Helen had developed a habit of stopping all fluid intake after 2:00 p.m. She would have her coffee in the morning, a small glass of water with lunch, and then nothing for the rest of the day. Helen's blood pressure readings were chaotic. In the mornings, they were reasonably okay, but by late afternoon and evening, her heart rate would go up and her blood pressure would climb into the 160s. She also felt fatigued, foggy, and sometimes dizzy when she stood up. She thought these were just signs of being 82. The reality was that by 5 p.m., Helen's blood was becoming like sludge. Blood is roughly 50% water. When you are dehydrated, your blood volume drops, but the blood itself becomes thicker and more viscous. Think about trying to pump water through a straw versus trying to pump a milkshake through a straw. Your heart has to work much, much harder to push that thick blood through the tiny capillaries of your body. This resistance raises the pressure. Furthermore, when the body senses dehydration, it releases a hormone called vasopressin. As the name suggests, this hormone presses on the vessels. It constricts them tightly to hold on to whatever water is left in the body. So Helen had thick blood trying to move through tight vessels. No wonder her pressure was high. We had to find a compromise for Helen. She couldn't drink a gallon of water before bed, but she couldn't starve her veins either. We implemented a front-loading hydration strategy. I asked Helen to drink 2 large glasses of water immediately upon waking up. This rehydrates the body after 8 hours of sleep. Then, she was to drink steadily until 4:00 p.m. After 4:00 p.m., she could switch to small sips just to keep her mouth moist. The change in her afternoons was dramatic. Within a week, the afternoon fatigue vanished. Her evening blood pressure stabilized because her blood viscosity remained normal. She wasn't forcing her heart to pump sludge. Interestingly, she found that by hydrating better earlier in the day, she actually slept better because her body wasn't under the stress of dehydration, and she didn't have to wake up any more than usual. For you, the lesson is to treat water as a medication. It is that important. If you wait until you are thirsty, you are already behind. Aim for clear, pale yellow urine. If it is dark yellow or amber, you are not drinking enough. One specific note on safety. If you have been diagnosed with congestive heart failure, CHF, and your doctor has put you on a fluid restriction, you must follow that restriction. In heart failure, too much fluid can be dangerous, but for the average senior with hypertension, dehydration is usually the bigger enemy. Also, be mindful of diuretics, water pills. If you take a diuretic, you are losing fluid on purpose, so you need to be careful not to let yourself get dangerously dry, which can lead to fainting and kidney strain. This supports a healthy blood volume, keeping the fluid in your pipes moving freely rather than clogging up the system. If you are finding these tips practical, please consider subscribing. It helps us continue to bring you this information without any of the hype or confusion. 7. The post-meal movement. We have discussed the 5-minute stillness rule for measuring, but now we need to talk about the 10-minute movement rule for living. This connects back to the glucose story we shared earlier. We know that high blood sugar stiffens the arteries and raises the top number. The most dangerous time for your blood sugar, and subsequently your blood pressure, is the 2 hours immediately following a large meal. David, a 65-year-old retired accountant, is the perfect example here. David had a routine that many of us would find familiar. He would eat a hearty dinner at 6:30 p.m., usually meat, potatoes, maybe some bread, and a dessert. Immediately after the last bite, he would move to his favorite recliner, put his feet up, and watch television for 3 or 4 hours until bed. He called this his relaxation time. David was frustrated because his morning blood pressure was always high, often 150/90, despite taking his meds at night. He couldn't figure out why. The issue was what was happening during his relaxation time. By sitting completely still after a large meal, David was essentially locking the doors to his muscles. When you eat, glucose floods your bloodstream. Your body releases insulin to push that glucose into your muscles to be used as energy. But if your muscles are completely inactive, if you are slumped in a recliner, they don't ask for the energy. The insulin has to shout louder, meaning your body makes more of it, to force the sugar in. This causes a massive spike in insulin and sugar that lasts for hours. This spike keeps the sympathetic nervous system agitated. It prevents the blood pressure from dipping naturally as you get tired. David went to bed with his system flooded with sugar and insulin, keeping his vessels stiff and his pressure high all night long. That is why his morning numbers were terrible. We made a deal with David. He didn't have to join a gym. He didn't have to run. All he had to do was the 10-minute post-meal stroll. Immediately after dinner, before the dishes, before the TV, he had to walk for 10 minutes. It could be around the block. It could be just pacing around his living room and kitchen. Why 10 minutes? Because 10 minutes of gentle muscle contraction is enough to activate a different pathway for glucose uptake. When muscles are moving, they can soak up sugar from the blood without needing nearly as much insulin. They act like a sponge. By walking for just 10 minutes, David blunted his blood sugar spike by almost 30%. This meant less insulin, less arterial stiffness, and a calmer nervous system. After 2 weeks of this simple habit, David's morning blood pressure readings started to drop. He woke up feeling more refreshed because his body had actually rested during the night instead of fighting a metabolic war. The simple act of moving when he was full changed his entire overnight profile. For you, this is the easiest lever to pull. It helps with digestion, it helps with sugar, and it helps with pressure. It doesn't have to be brisk walking, it just has to be movement. If you have joint pain or mobility issues, you don't even have to walk. You can sit in a chair and march your legs up and down or do sit-to-stands holding onto the counter. The goal is simply to engage the large muscles of the legs. Safety is key here. Do not engage in vigorous, high-intensity exercise immediately after a heavy meal, as this can divert blood flow away from the stomach and cause cramping or indigestion. We are talking about a stroll, not a sprint. Just keep the body upright and moving. This supports better metabolic health, which is the foundation of soft, flexible arteries. 8. The pillow prop strategy. We have spoken about what you do when you are awake, But we must address the 8 hours when you are unconscious. For many seniors, the most dangerous spike in systolic blood pressure, the top number, does not happen when they are stressed at the bank. It happens when they are sound asleep. This is a phenomenon that often goes unnoticed until the damage is done. The position of your body during sleep directly dictates the oxygen levels in your blood, and if those levels drop, your brain sends a panic signal to your heart to pump harder, raising your pressure while you dream. Let me introduce you to Thomas. Thomas was 76 years old and a man of routine. He slept on his back, using one thin pillow, just as he had done his entire life. Thomas's wife often mentioned that he snored loudly, occasionally snorting or gasping, but Thomas dismissed it as just old man noise. His daytime blood pressure was managed reasonably well with medication, sitting around 135/80. However, Thomas started waking up with a dull, throbbing headache at the base of his skull almost every morning. He also felt unrefreshed, no matter how long he slept. When Thomas finally agreed to wear a 24-hour blood pressure monitor, the results were shocking. During the day, his numbers were fine, but at 3 a.m., his systolic pressure was spiking to 180. This is called nocturnal hypertension. Because Thomas was sleeping flat on his back, gravity was pulling the soft tissue of his throat downward, narrowing his airway. He wasn't getting enough air. His brain, sensing a lack of oxygen, flooded his system with adrenaline to wake him up just enough to breathe. This adrenaline caused his blood vessels to clamp down tight in the middle of the night. We didn't immediately rush Thomas to surgery or a CPAP machine, although those are sometimes necessary. We started with a mechanical fix, the pillow prop. I instructed Thomas to change his sleeping geometry. Instead of lying flat on his back, he needed to sleep on his side. To keep himself there, he placed a firm pillow behind his back so he couldn't roll over. Furthermore, he elevated his head slightly using a wedge pillow, keeping his upper body at a slight incline. The change in his morning symptoms was immediate. By sleeping on his side with his head elevated, gravity no longer closed his airway. His oxygen levels remained stable. Because his brain didn't panic from a lack of air, it didn't spike his adrenaline. His nocturnal blood pressure settled down. The morning headaches vanished because his brain hadn't been under high pressure all night. He woke up with energy for the first time in years. For you, the explanation is simple physics. As we age, the muscles in our throat lose tone, just like the muscles in our legs. They collapse more easily. If you sleep flat on your back, you are inviting airway resistance. This resistance forces the heart to work overtime. By simply ignoring the back sleeper habit and becoming a side sleeper or an elevated sleeper, you mechanically open the pipe. You allow the air to flow freely. When oxygen flows freely, blood pressure stays low. Here is how to do it. Tonight, try to sleep on your left side. Sleeping on the left side is often preferred because it improves circulation to the heart and aids digestion. Place a pillow between your knees to align your hips. This reduces back pain, which can also raise blood pressure. If you must sleep on your back due to shoulder pain, use a wedge pillow or prop up the head of your bed by 6 inches. You want your head and chest to be higher than your stomach. A crucial safety note: if you often wake up gasping for air, or if your partner says you stop breathing entirely, you must see your doctor. You may have sleep apnea, which is a serious condition. But for many seniors with mild snoring or airway narrowing, positional therapy is a powerful, drug-free way to protect your vessels overnight. This supports a restful night where your blood pressure can naturally dip and recover, rather than fighting a battle while you sleep. 9. The magnesium shield. We discussed potassium earlier as the partner to sodium, but there is another mineral that acts as the manager of your muscle tension, and that includes the muscles wrapped around your arteries. That mineral is magnesium. While potassium balances fluids, magnesium actively relaxes tissue. It is nature's calcium channel blocker. Calcium causes muscles to contract and harden. Magnesium causes them to release and soften. In the modern senior diet, magnesium is almost non-existent, leading to a state of chronic, low-level vessel tension. Consider the case of Susan. Susan was 71 and suffered from stiff everything. She had stiff joints, stiff neck muscles, leg cramps at night, and, unsurprisingly, stiff arteries with a blood pressure of 152/90. She was an anxious person, always worrying about her grandchildren or the news. Her doctor had prescribed medication, but she complained it made her feel tired. She wanted to know why her body felt so tight all the time. We looked at Susan's diet. She didn't eat nuts because they were too hard to chew. She didn't eat leafy greens because they upset her stomach. She mostly ate soft foods, yogurt, bread, cooked carrots. These foods are fine, but they are void of magnesium. Without magnesium, Susan's calcium was running wild, causing her muscles and arteries to stay in a locked, contracted state. Her high blood pressure was just one symptom of a body that couldn't relax. We introduced the magnesium shield into her life through specific, soft, magnesium-rich foods. We didn't force her to eat raw almonds. Instead, we had her use almond butter in her oatmeal. We introduced cooked Swiss chard and spinach. When cooked down, they are soft and easy to digest but packed with magnesium. We also had her start snacking on pumpkin seeds, pepitas, which are softer than nuts and are a magnesium powerhouse. Within 6 weeks, the first thing Susan noticed wasn't her blood pressure, it was her legs. The night cramps stopped, her neck felt looser, she felt calmer emotionally, and then the numbers followed. Her resting systolic pressure drifted down to 138. Her arteries were finally receiving the chemical signal to let go. She wasn't fighting her own body anymore. The simple explanation is that your arteries have a muscular layer. If you are magnesium deficient, that layer stays tight. By replenishing magnesium, you are chemically unlocking the vessel. It allows the tube to widen, which lowers the pressure of the fluid running through it. To apply this, look for the green and the seeds. Dark chocolate, in moderation, 70% cocoa or higher, is also a surprising source of magnesium and can be a nice treat. A quarter cup of pumpkin seeds contains nearly half your daily requirement. You can sprinkle them on salads or soups. A note on caution. Just like with potassium, if you have advanced kidney disease, you must clear magnesium intake with your doctor. Also, magnesium can loosen the bowels. If you notice digestive upset, scale back the amount. We want to relax the arteries, not upset the stomach. This supports a systemic relaxation that lowers the top number and eases the physical tension that often accompanies high blood pressure. 10. The morning buffer zone. There is a specific time of day that cardiologists worry about more than any other. It is the hour immediately after you wake up. Statistically, this is the most common time for strokes and cardiac events. This phenomenon is called the morning surge. When you wake up, your body releases a cocktail of hormones, specifically cortisol and adrenaline, to get you out of bed. This is natural. It's what gives you the energy to stand up. But for a senior with stiff arteries, this sudden jolt can send the top number soaring dangerously high, sometimes 30 or 40 points higher than your nighttime reading. Let's talk about Richard. Richard was 69, a retired military officer. He treated his morning like a drill. The alarm would go off at 6 a.m. sharp. He would immediately throw off the covers, jump out of bed, do 10 push-ups, and jump in a cold shower. He thought this discipline was keeping him young, but Richard started feeling dizzy and seeing stars every morning around 6:15 a.m. One morning, he actually collapsed in the bathroom. Richard's blood pressure during this routine was spiking to 190/100. He was taking a system that was stiff and cold from sleep and hitting it with a sledgehammer of adrenaline and physical demand. His heart couldn't adjust fast enough, so the pressure skyrocketed to force blood to his brain. We had to teach Richard the morning buffer. The rule was simple. From the moment his eyes opened, he had to take 30 minutes to reach operating speed. He was not allowed to jump out of bed. Here is the routine we gave him, and it is the routine I want you to consider. When you wake up, stay in bed for 2 minutes. Do some gentle stretches, wiggle your toes, rotate your ankles, open and close your hands. This wakes up the peripheral circulation gently. Then, sit on the edge of the bed for another minute. Let your body adjust to the vertical position. When you stand up, move slowly. Go to the kitchen and drink a glass of room temperature water, not ice cold. Do not exercise immediately. Save the push-ups for later in the morning when your muscles are warm and your vessels are dilated. Richard hated slowing down at first, but the results were undeniable. The dizziness stopped instantly. His 8 UG/AM blood pressure reading dropped from the danger zone to a manageable 140. He realized that at 69, his body needed a warm-up lap before the race began. The explanation is that your baroreceptors, the pressure sensors, are sluggish in the morning. If you rush them, they panic. By moving slowly, you allow the body to chemically adjust to the day without needing a massive spike in pressure. This protects you from the most volatile hour of the day, ensuring you start your morning safely. 11. The temperature trap. This final item is often completely ignored, yet it affects your numbers profoundly. We are talking about the temperature of your environment. As we age, our ability to regulate body temperature declines, and our blood vessels become hypersensitive to cold. Cold is a vasoconstrictor. It makes vessels shrink. Heat is a vasodilator. It makes vessels open. For a senior, a drafty room or a cold walk to the mailbox can spike the top number by 20 points in seconds. Let me tell you about Joan. Joan was 75 and lived in a drafty older house. She was frugal and kept the thermostat low in the winter to save money, wearing a sweater indoors. She noticed that every winter her blood pressure would climb significantly and her doctor would have to increase her medication. Every summer her pressure would drop and she would feel lightheaded, forcing her to reduce medication. She thought her hypertension was seasonal. It wasn't seasonal, it was thermal. Joan's body was constantly fighting the cold in her house by clamping down her surface arteries to preserve heat for her organs. This meant her heart was pumping against a tightened system all winter long. We advised Joan to prioritize her microclimate. She didn't have to heat the whole house, but she needed to keep her body warm. The most important change was wearing a scarf indoors and keeping her feet warm. The neck is full of temperature sensors and large blood vessels. If your neck is cold, your brain thinks the whole body is in danger and raises blood pressure to conserve heat. Joan started wearing a light, comfortable scarf while watching TV and invested in warm wool socks. She also drank warm herbal tea throughout the day. The result was that her winter hypertension disappeared. Her vessels remained relaxed because they weren't trying to hoard heat. She stabilized on the same dose of medication year-round. For you, the actionable step is to check your environment. If your hands and feet are always cold, your blood pressure is likely higher than it needs to be. Dress in layers. If you go outside in the cold, cover your nose and mouth with a scarf. Breathing in freezing air triggers a reflex in the lungs that raises heart rate and blood pressure immediately. Warm the air before it hits your lungs. This supports a stable internal environment where your vessels are not reacting defensively to the weather. General conclusion for the entire script. We have journeyed through a comprehensive roadmap designed specifically for the unique physiology of the body after 60. We started by asking the question, which number is more dangerous? We learned that for you, the top number, systolic, is the primary indicator of arterial stiffness and the one that demands your focus. But we didn't stop at the diagnosis. We built a strategy for the cure. Let's recap the complete toolkit you now possess, combining everything we have discussed. 1. You learned the 5-minute stillness rule, ensuring you are measuring your resting pressure, not your active pressure, by waiting 5 full minutes before every reading. 2. You understood the top number truth. Why the gap between the numbers matters and why a low bottom number doesn't cancel out a high top number. 3. You connected the dots with the glucose connection, realizing that sugar stiffens the arteries just as much as salt does, and that managing prediabetes is actually managing blood pressure. 4. You balanced your diet with the potassium balance, shifting your focus from just cutting salt to actively adding foods like potatoes and avocados to relax the vessels. 5. You mastered the breathing reset, using a longer exhale to mechanically switch off the panic response and lower a spike in minutes. 6. You committed to the hydration factor, keeping the blood thin and moving freely by drinking water early in the day. 7. You activated the post-meal movement, a simple 10-minute stroll to burn off sugar spikes before they can harden your arteries. 8. You adjusted your sleep with the pillow prop, opening your airway to prevent dangerous nighttime adrenaline spikes. 9. You softened your muscles with the magnesium shield, eating seeds and greens to chemically unlock the tension in your vessel walls. 10. You protected yourself with the morning buffer, moving slowly in the first hour to avoid the cortisol surge. 11. You respected the temperature trap, keeping your neck and extremities warm to prevent cold-induced constriction. This is not just a list of tips, it is a new way of living. It is a lifestyle of low resistance. Every choice you make, from the food on your fork to the way you breathe when you are stressed, to the scarf you wear in the winter, is either adding resistance to your arteries or taking it away. You do not need to be perfect. You do not need to do all 11 things tomorrow morning. Start with 1. Maybe tomorrow you just focus on the water. Next week, you focus on the post-meal walk. As you stack these habits, you will likely find that your numbers begin to drift down, not because you forced them down with more pills, but because you created an environment inside your body where high pressure is simply no longer necessary. I'm Dr. Ben Harris. Thank you for giving me your time and your trust. Remember, your health is a marathon, not a sprint, and you now have the right shoes to run it. If you found this guide helpful, please share it with a friend or family member who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe for more senior-focused, nonsense-free health advice. I'll see you in the next video.